What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my review of Ruined King after 100%. So a few things to get out of the way right at the beginning of the video. For this video, a bit more than usual for starters, so I'll try to post a timestamp in the description so you can skip ahead a little bit because I got a few things to talk about here at the beginning. So for starters, my standard spiel. I like to review games after 100% because it lends some credibility to what I do, sets me apart from other reviewers on YouTube. My Steam profile is public, it's on my channel, also linked in the description below, feel free to look at that. Also, if you want to know what a review after 100% entails, it is not just the achievements. That said, this game has a fairly exhaustive achievement list. If you're interested in everything I cover in these reviews and you go to my channel page, the first video you're going to see if you're not subscribed is a video explaining it. Now, on to the other stuff. Ruined King is a League of Legends spin-off. Now, me personally, I have no real experience with League of Legends. I am aware of what it is, but I don't really play MOBAs that much, so it's not a particularly interesting thing to me. Now, a while back, Riot Forge, which is a third-party publishing company that is owned by Riot, who makes League of Legends, decided they want to expand the League of Legends universe. So Riot Forge is in charge of basically contracting studios out to make League of Legends games, and just in general expanding that universe. Ruined King itself is developed by Airship Syndicate, which is known for another series called Battle Chasers that I understand is fairly similar to this game, at least in terms of structure, etc. So I tell you all that basically to tell you this. This being a League of Legends spin-off, my impressions going into this review were basically that this game was probably not going to be good, because most spin-offs are terrible. And I'll talk about positives and negatives and things more towards the end of the review, but I just wanted to mention going into it, that's what I expected. And luckily, I think it turns out that this game's at least aspiring to be more than just a spin-off. And one more thing I have to explain, hence the timestamp and everything, is that a few months back, actually, Riot Forge contacted my channel directly through my business email. And they were like, hey, we're going to be publishing some games and everything soon, and we like your channel, would like to formally invite you to become part of our creator program. Now, if you're unaware of how this kind of thing works for YouTubers, basically you sign up, they'll give you review keys and things for free so you can make content out of their games. All in all, fairly standard. So, fast forward, Ruined King launches, they send me a review copy. I did a checkout video for it actually, and I mentioned that I'd get back to the review when I had time, which I did, and in the interim, they actually wound up sending me a collector's edition of the game as well. So just kind of disclosing all that information so people watching this are aware of that connection, and while this video is not sponsored in any way, legally I am required to disclose if it is, and it is not, but I think all of that is relevant information for people. So, with no further ado, let's jump into this video here. So, for the people that skipped ahead, Ruined King is a very much so JRPG formatted League of Legends style game. Now, if you've ever played a JRPG, you're basically going to get the gist of how this game flows and works, which is why I mention it. That said, all in all, 100%ing the game took me around 40 hours. For most people, a regular run-through is going to give you about 20 or 30 hours for the story, but I played it once through on its hard difficulty, if you will. I believe it's called Heroic, and then you can actually play the game after you complete it to wrap up all the achievements, so it really wasn't that bad. Now, the story setup for the game is that you take control of 6 of the League of Legends champions, though you will see more than that throughout the game, but 6 of them are playable and will be part of your team, and you're primarily in the city of Bilgewater, and the nearby Shadow Isles have been known to unleash the Black Mist that causes harrowings, which are basically spirits and everything, laying waste to the land. And while there's definitely more to it, the basic gist of it is that you would like to prevent that from happening. Now, without spoilers, I'm not really going to go into any more detail than that. Again, just the story setup there. But normally this is where I talk about character creation, so instead we're going to talk about these 6 playable champions. Now, the 6 playable ones are going to be Misfortune, Illaoi, Braum, Yasuo, Pyke, and Ahri. Now, for people familiar with League of Legends, they might be more familiar with these characters. To me, they were completely brand new. So, obviously, they all have their own personalities. Misfortune just recently took the city of Bilgewater over from another League of Legends champion named Gangplank. Illaoi is a priestess of a Kraken god. Yasuo is basically a samurai whose master was killed. Braum is kind of adorable, is actually out to save the children of his homeland from some disease, which he believes the waters of the Shadow Isles might be able to cure. Ahri is a member of some race I don't fully understand just from playing this game, to be honest. But she has to be careful, otherwise she can absorb people's life essence, which kills them. Seemingly in the manner of a succubi, just minus, the extra stuff. And then last but not least, Pike. He's probably the most interesting. Also a bit of a tragic backstory thing, but basically he was betrayed and died at sea and was reborn as a revenant, and now he hunts down ne'er-do-wells, if you will, and murders them violently. Now, each of these characters is going to get different builds that they can kind of lean into. So you're going to level them up in classic JRPG fashion. The max level is actually just 30. So each level is fairly substantial, but as they level up, they're going to unlock new abilities that they can use in combat, ability points to upgrade those abilities with, as well as rune shards. Now, the ability upgrades are fairly limited by your level up. So once you hit max level, you're going to have all your abilities unlocked. You're going to have all of the ability upgrade points that you're going to get. And then in the abilities screen, you can then mix and match upgrades to the abilities that you can use in combat, which can kind of lead to some sort of builds that you can use in the turn-based battle modes, which we'll talk a bit more about in the combat section. And then there is the rune system. The rune system is basically just passives that you can spend your rune shard points on, and you get these while you level up as well. However, due to some of the mechanics of the game, while this might seem limiting at first, you can, if you're crafty about it and you have the patience to grind, actually just unlock all of these. And having so many points in one tree or the other for the runes will unlock little passive buffs. Again, though, you can literally unlock all of these because there are 2 vendors that will actually sell books that will grant each character rune shards. And in total, you can get 25 of these books, which is an extra 25 rune points. And while that will require a ton of grinding and engaging with a minigame, it is possible, so I wanted to mention it. So with the characters we're playing out of the way, let's talk about world building a bit. So in terms of exploring this world, again, it's very JRPG. But basically you're going to be going from small map to small map. You can explore Bilgewater. You'll eventually be able to sail the ocean a little bit, which is really just going to set maps. And then later you'll get to access the Shadow Isles as well, which will then open up some more areas to explore. There's a lot of fast travel between these points, so it does actually feel like a world a fair bit, which is nice because there's teleports on the Shadow Isles, but then you'll have to go back to the port to take your boat to either go to the ocean locations or back to Bilgewater. Bilgewater has its own little fast travel system, but not in the part of town that's been overrun by the spirits and everything I mentioned earlier. So it just kind of feels like a fleshed out world, which is always nice. Now, in addition to those things, there's actually quite a bit to do around Bilgewater. There are side quests, of course. There are bounties, puzzles, an arena, a fishing minigame. So the side quests can all be found through an NPC called the Rumor Monger. So throughout points in the story, if you go to the Rumor Monger, they can sell you little leads to the side quests for cheap. So they're all pretty easy to find. In addition to this, there are bounties that you can undertake by going to the bounty board, which will then give you, of course, optional boss encounters that have different mechanics. There is the arena at the Baron's Rest Inn in Bilgewater, which will see you usually in a 1v1 competition, so you'll pick one of your 6 heroes to then fight a battle against a specific enemy. It also has unique mechanics. And then there's the fishing minigame. This is super straightforward. They try to make a little minigame out of it, but you can upgrade your fishing pole as part of your equipment upgrades. And if you do that, it becomes basically impossible to fail fishing, at which point you can literally just hold E the entire time to reel it in. So that's a thing. But that said, you might want to engage with the fishing system a little bit because the fishing system gives you access to black marks. Basically, you'll fish up rare fish. You can trade them to an NPC called the Fishmonger, who will give you black marks. Black marks are used for specialty items. You can actually buy alternative skins for your champion with black marks, which is a little funny. And honestly, not unwelcome when it's not attached to some sort of cash shop, which I appreciated. But basically, you can use these black marks to buy the rune shard things that I mentioned earlier from another vendor called the Artifact Vendor, who's basically right next to the Fishmonger, as well as some other rare armor. Let's talk about combat a little bit. Now, combat is turn-based, very JRPG style. You'll run into enemies in the overworld, which will then bring you to a battle stage, at which point you'll have your turn-based battle. Now, there are a few unique things here that we're going to talk about, but before we even engage in the fight, and we're on the overworld section, I do want to mention a couple things. Each champion that you're using in your party of 3 at a time has a dungeon ability. So if you press Z or X, you can alternate between which character you are actively running around with, and this character will have a unique dungeon ability. And if you use that dungeon ability to engage the enemies you see on screen, you can apply various buffs and debuffs, etc., to your party or their party and catch them by surprise, take away like 10% of their starting health, that type of stuff, and then actually start the combat with that in mind, which is a nice little touch. Now, in addition to this, we see their interesting lane system. So in combat, every hero is going to get instant attacks, lane abilities, and ultimates. Now, instant attacks can be upgraded and used like all of your other abilities, but they are instant, meaning that they happen right away. Whereas your lane abilities take a few moments to actually use, which will affect the order of the lane system that you can see towards the bottom of the screen there. Now, in addition, lane abilities can be cast from the speed, balance, or power lane, which will affect their turn order, which is something you need to keep in mind as you're playing the game. So when you use abilities, you can see the adjustment made to the lane order below, and as things approach the left side of the screen there, those abilities will trigger. So when it becomes your character's turn and you choose a lane ability, this will actually move your character's portrait to the appropriate place in the turn order now, and that's when that lane ability will take effect. And this is further modified by using the speed lane, which will make the ability happen faster, or the power lane, which will of course make it stronger but happen later, and balance, which is of course in the middle. Now, in addition to these, some fights will have hazards and things which will affect certain lanes. So when you use your lane abilities, you have to make sure that your character's portrait on the lane system doesn't wind up in the middle of that hazard. This is also used for buffs and things for your characters as well. And then last but not least, we have our ultimate abilities. Now, these are very cinematic in style when you use them, and each character gets 3 of them. And actually, some bosses will use them against you as well, which is worth mentioning. Ultimate abilities, again, each character gets 3. The first 2 of them you are going to get just as you level up. However, the third one for each character requires completion of a side quest specific to that character, which I thought was pretty cool. And this is also a pretty good time to mention that in addition to this, each character has an ultimate weapon. That is to say, a legendary weapon. Once you get to a certain point in the game, you can find a forge, which will then unlock several side quests to find each character's legendary weapon, which requires you to find several parts and then make it in the forge. Now, I mention this because this is hands down the best in slot weapon for every single character, and while some are definitely easier than others, a few of them require you to solve puzzles that the game doesn't really bother to explain at all, which I thought was honestly nice. You don't really see that too much in games these days. But that said, let's talk some positives, some negatives, and then wrap this thing up and call it a review. So, positives. If you've never played League of Legends, I think this is a really cool place to get an introduction to the universe they're trying to build. So again, I've never played League of Legends. I have no interest in playing it, which the people watching this video may or may not take offense to, but frankly, I'm not really into online style games, especially competitive ones against other people. I'm mostly a single player RPG kind of guy these days. So games like that, and frankly anything with an online component, just isn't my jam. So as such, it was nice to learn about this universe in a way that catered to that, a single player RPG. Other positives, this sort of comic book art style that they went with. It's my understanding that one of the people who works at Airship Syndicate actually worked on the Darksiders franchise, which makes sense because you see a lot of those artistic elements in place. So I was a big fan of that. And another big positive is that I ran into, at least on PC, almost no bugs. The game crashed once in about 40 hours, and when you use Ahri in combat, for some reason, after her turn ends, there's like a 5-second delay before the turn switch, but that was really the only 2 problems that I had. Now that said, I did look this up because I had such an easy time, and I was like, man, I can't remember the last time a game launched and I had this little trouble playing it, which is kind of sad when you think about it. But nonetheless, I actually looked it up just to see what problems other people were having, and apparently on different platforms and stuff, there are other issues. Apparently Switch had a game-breaking bug, which sucked. But on PC, I genuinely had 0 trouble. Now let's talk negatives a little bit. The game is very short. So again, a full run-through, like just not trying to do all the things, you're looking at maybe 20 to 30 hours with an incredibly thorough playthrough. It took me about 40 to 100% it, so I mean, do with that what you will. But the game is short, one way or the other. And despite it being short, the combat does get pretty repetitive, in that despite what they've done to try to mix it up, you're going to start every fight, use the same abilities, have the same outcome, so it gets a little boring. They try to mix that up, which is nice, but frankly, if this game was any longer, I think it would have bothered me to no end how repetitive it was, but even in the short runtime, it still got repetitive, so I wanted to mention that here. So to draw a conclusion and wrap this thing up, the game is about $30 on Steam, which given its runtime, I think is a very fair price. But more than anything, my conclusion is, despite the couple negatives here and there, I was genuinely surprised at the quality of this game. And while sure, I'd say the only unique thing I saw here outside of the setting and things is the Laine system for the combat. Most of it is mechanics I've seen elsewhere. But in spite of that, the game was fun, it was engaging, especially as someone who's never played League of Legends, so all of the characters and things were pretty new to me. I had a lot of fun playing it, and truthfully, my biggest complaint was that it wasn't long enough and I would like more. So I think for $30, yeah, absolutely, go crazy. It's a great game. And on that note, in the future, I hope they release more of these style single-player RPGs. Personally, I prefer custom character creation, but given that this is League of Legends expanded universe stuff, I don't really expect to ever see a game with that. But nonetheless, going into this review with the idea that this was probably just going to be a League of Legends spinoff and it wasn't going to be very good, the game very much so changed my mind and exceeded those expectations a great deal. So there you go, guys, my review of Ruined King after 100%. I hope you enjoyed the video. By all means, let me know what you guys think of the game itself down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.